Hey there, guys. Bill here, Mr. Power Washing. Just want to do a real quick video on a little wiring tip. I know when it gets down to the wire at the last minute of our builds, we try and pinch pennies where we can, and I'm a victim of that myself. In the past, I have used this this two-wire, called either trailer wiring. You could buy it as speaker wire on a roll. Amazon sells a ton of this stuff. This is technically 10 gauge wire, and it was cheap. That's why I got it, and I used it. And for lighting, it is fine. It's fine to run LED lights. It's fine to run your Flow Pro, remote downstream, any bypass, any of that stuff. But I did use this on my electric Titan reels. And what had happened is one day on a job, all of a sudden, reels stopped working. So I said, okay, crap, there goes the motor. So got a replacement motor, pain in the ass, getting it out and putting the new one in. Go to hit the button and it won't work. So what was the issue? I very simply took a jumper wire. Jumper wire, here we are. These aren't the ones I use, these are very thin. But always troubleshoot before you go ahead and just say you're gonna replace something. And I just went right from the back of the solenoid to the hot wire on the motor, or not the back of the solenoid, the front of the solenoid, which bypasses the solenoid, and it worked. So the motor worked. So what was the problem? The problem was somewhere in this cheap wire, it had broke, basically. Now, when you look at wire, this is 10 gauge wire, and I think I got a 50-foot roll for, I don't know, it was less than $10. It was cheap. And then I went and got this at a swap meet 2 weekends ago, this 100-foot roll of 10 gauge wire for $25. And that's just one wire. This was two. So obviously this is about a quarter of the price. What's the big difference? If we look, one, you could just tell by the insulation. It's a softer insulation. So a lot of times, especially with extension cords, when you're getting a higher gauge wire, a lot of times you'll have to look at the insulation, because if the wire isn't insulated properly, the part that you touch, the outside, is actually going to conduct heat from the current passing through it, especially if it's not a good material. So the cord itself will get hot, which is then a fire risk, which is why a lot of the better, heavier duty cords are so much more expensive, because the casing, the insulation around them is so much better. Not only are the wires inside insulated, but then it's got a jacket around that, and then the outside jacket that is exposed, especially if it's an outdoor cord. So if we look at this here, we have got there's probably 50 strands of wire here. All these little guys, right? Now we come and we look at this more expensive wire here. If this will focus. Now we've got a nice tight bundle. There's maybe 12 wires in here, maybe. And if I go to pull them apart, like they're much stiffer, okay? This is a higher grade wire. The insulation is better. I can bend it, and because it's thicker wires, it actually holds its shape. Whereas this, you just bend it and it just kind of bends itself back out. So more of the story, cheap wire, especially sometimes you can get different grades and actually have aluminum wire, which is cheaper. Aluminum's cheaper than copper. The problem with aluminum is it gets brittle. And I think that's what actually ended up happening with this, is if there's just a little bit of water, or we all know we work with bleach, if some bleach fumes happen to get in somewhere, and somewhere halfway down this wire, it can just start to corrode. And as soon as it gets, if you bend this too hard, all these tiny little wires could start snapping, and then you've got a broken connection in there. If you break half the wires, now you've only got, realistically, half of a 10 gauge wire is 20 gauge. So you've got 20 gauge wire that you're trying to pull 15, 20 amps from. That's not going to work. It's going to heat up, and eventually it's going to fail, which is probably what happened to mine. So long story short, I now invested in some better gauge wire. Another quick tip when I wire my trailer, let me get up here and show you. So I don't have as many wires going around. I treat my trailer like a car or the work truck. The chassis is the ground. So every ground wire that I have goes to a bolt that's mounted somewhere. So I'm only going to have one wire coming up here from my battery going to this switch, my hot wire, and then I'm going to piggyback from there over to the other reel. I'm not going to have a separate ground coming up and then ground the frame or ground the solenoid or ground the motor separate. No, it's unnecessary. As long as you have a good quality ground, use heat shrink tubing, use the little star washers if you don't have bare metal. Do that, and then you can cut down on the amount of clutter that you have on the trailer, especially when it comes to wiring. So that's all. Get good grade wire. Anything like electric reels, I'd recommend 10 gauge. I go even heavier. I think I've got six or four. What do we got here? 6 gauge. Yeah, 6 gauge for the cables for the starters on the machines. And those come from a bulkhead that I got on Amazon, or not a bulkhead, a distribution block. There we go. These guys work really good, just for getting one hot from a battery. So yeah, that's it. Just quick wiring tip. Make sure you guys are safe and doing things correctly. Talk to y'all soon.